Hello, I'm Jerry Fort. Welcome to Jungle Jerry's Treehouse. This is the next one in line of the series, Christmas in Camelot by Pope Osborne. Looks like Jack and Annie are riding a reindeer. So this one would be number 28. 28 or 29, I can't remember which one it is. But this is a hardcover. This is the first hardcover when my wife started buying hardcovers for Jeremy. This is where she started. The other ones, as you could see, were all paperback. Yeah, this was the first hardcover that she got for him. All the rest of them that I'm going to read that we own right now are all hardcovers. Let's see how much of this I can read before my lunch is over with here. Okay, here we are. Chapter 1, A Royal Invitation. Excuse the light in my eyes. I'm uploading a video and I'm trying to keep an eye on it, make sure it's going. So I don't have anything to block the light so you can see it in my glasses, so I apologize for that. Sunlight had faded from the late afternoon sky. Puffy snow clouds were moving in. "Let's hurry, I'm cold," said Jack. He and Annie were walking home from school. Their Christmas vacation was just beginning. C-O-O-C-O-O. Cuckoo? "Wait," said Annie. "Look." She pointed to a white bird. "Oh, coo, coo." Maybe it's like a dove or something. She pointed to a white bird sitting on a bare tree branch at the edge of the woods. The bird was staring straight at him. "It's a dove," said Jack. "It's a messenger," said Annie. "From Morgan." No, Jack said, afraid to get his hopes up. They hadn't seen Morgan Le Fay in a long time. He really missed her. "Yes," said Annie. "She has a mission for us. I can feel it." In the hush of the cold twilight, the dove spread its wings and flew into the Frog Creek woods. "Come on," said Annie. "The treehouse is back." "You're just hoping," said Jack. "I'm knowing," said Annie. She ran into the woods following the white dove. "Oh, brother," said Jack, but he took off after her. Even in the growing darkness, they easily found their way. They zigzagged between the bare trees and ran over the frozen ground until they came to the tallest oak in the woods. "See?" said Annie, pointing to the top of the tree. "Yeah," whispered Jack. There it was, the magic treehouse. "Morgan!" shouted Annie. Jack held his breath, waiting to see the enchantress at the treehouse window, but Morgan did not appear. Annie grabbed the rope ladder and started up. Jack followed. When they climbed inside the treehouse, Jack saw something lying on the floor. It was a scroll, rolled up and tied with a red velvet ribbon. Jack picked up the scroll and unrolled it. The thick yellowed paper shimmered with large gold writing. "Wow, Morgan sent us a really fancy note," said Annie. "It's an invitation," said Jack. "Listen." "Dear Jack and Annie, Please accept this royal invitation to spend Christmas in the kingdom of Camelot. Signed, M. Christmas in Camelot, said Annie. I don't believe it. Cool, whispered Jack. He pictured a beautiful, glowing castle lit with candles and filled with knights and ladies feasting and singing. We're going to celebrate Christmas with Morgan and King Arthur, said Annie, and Queen Guinevere. Yeah, said Jack, and the Knights of the Round Table, like Sir Lancelot. Let's go, said Annie. Where's the book? She and Jack looked around the treehouse for a book about Camelot. The only book they saw was the Pennsylvania book that always brought them home. That's strange, said Jack. Morgan didn't send a book about Camelot with the royal invitation. How does she expect us to get there? I don't know, said Annie. Maybe she forgot. Jack picked up the invitation. He read it again. He turned it over, hoping to find more information. The back of the scroll was blank. He handed the invitation to Annie. She must have forgotten, he said. Darn, said Annie, staring at the gold writing. I really wished we could go to Camelot. The tree branches rustled. The wind began to blow. What's happening, said Jack. I don't know, said Annie. Wait a minute, said Jack. You were holding the invitation and you made a wish. The wind blew harder. That must have made the magic work, cried Annie. Jack felt a surge of joy. We're going to Camelot, he said. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 2. This is Camelot? Jack shivered. He could see his breath in the dim light. Annie was staring out the window. This is Camelot, she said. Jack looked out with her. The treehouse had landed in a grove of tall, bare trees. A huge, dark castle loomed against the gray sky. No light shone from its windows. No banners waved from its turrets. Wind whistled through its tall towers, sounding sad and lonely. It looks deserted, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. I hope we came to the right place. Jack pulled his notebook and pencil out of his pack. He wanted to write a description of the dark castle. Hey, I see someone, said Annie. Jack looked out the window again. A woman was crossing the castle drawbridge. Excuse me. She wore a long cloak and carried a lantern. Her white hair blew in the wind. Okay. Morgan? Said Annie and Jack together. They laughed with relief. Morgan hurried over the frost-covered ground toward the grove of trees. Annie, Jack, is that you? She called. Of course. Who'd you think? Shouted Annie. She started down from the treehouse. Jack threw his notebook into his backpack. He followed Annie down the rope ladder. When they reached the icy ground, they ran to Morgan and both threw their arms around her. I was looking out a window in the castle and saw a bright flash in the orchard, said Morgan. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? Maybe it's too soon. Maybe they went too soon. But the magic treehouse wouldn't have been there if it wasn't ready to take them somewhere. It only shows up when it's waiting for them, to take them somewhere. You didn't send the treehouse for us? Asked Jack. With a royal invitation to spend Christmas in Camelot? Asked Annie. No, said Morgan. She sounded alarmed. But the invitation was signed with an M, said Jack. I don't understand, said Morgan. We are not celebrating Christmas in Camelot this year. You aren't? Said Jack. Why not? Said Annie. A look of sadness crossed Morgan's face. Do you remember when you visited my library and gave King Arthur the hope and courage to challenge his enemy? She asked. Sure, said Jack. Well, Arthur's enemy was a man named Mordred, said Morgan. After you left, Arthur defeated him, but not before Mordred's dark wizard cast a spell over the whole kingdom. The spell robbed Camelot of all its joy. What? All its joy? Whispered Annie. Yes, said Morgan. For months, Camelot has been without music, without celebration, and without laughter. Oh no, said Annie. We can't. What can we do to help? Said Jack. Morgan smiled sadly. This time I don't think you can do anything, she said, but perhaps it will lift Arthur's spirits to see you both again. Come, let us go inside the castle. Morgan held up her lantern and started toward the drawbridge. Jack and Annie hurried after her. As they walked through the outer courtyard, the frozen grass cracked under their sneakers. They followed Morgan over the bridge and through a tall gate. There was no signs of life in the castle's inner courtyard. Where is everyone? Annie whispered to Jack. I don't know, he whispered back. Jack really wished they had a book about Camelot. It might help them understand what was going on. Morgan led them to a huge archway with 2 wooden doors. She stopped and looked at them. I'm afraid no book would help you tonight, Jack, she said. Jack was startled that Morgan had read his thoughts. Why not? Asked Annie. On all your other journeys you visited real places and times in history, said Morgan. Camelot is different. How? Said Jack. The story of Camelot is a legend, said Morgan. A legend is a story that begins in truth, but then imagination takes over. Different people in different times tell the story. They use their imaginations to add new parts. That is how a legend is kept alive. Tonight we'll add our part, said Annie. Yes, said Morgan, and please, I beg you in the lantern light. She looked very serious. Do not let the story of Camelot end forever. Keep our kingdom alive. Of course we will, said Annie. Good, said Morgan. Come then, let us go into the great hall and see the king. Morgan lifted an iron latch and pushed open the heavy doors. Jack and Annie followed her into the dark castle. Chapter 3. The Knights of the Round Table. A pair of torches dimly lit the drafty entrance hall of the castle. Shadows danced on the worn tapestries. Wait here, said Morgan. I will tell the king of your arrival. She headed through the huge stone archway that led to the great hall. Let's peek in, Annie said to Jack. Jack pushed his glasses into place. He and Annie walked quietly over to the big arch and peered in. The ceiling of the great hall towered high above a stone floor. At the far end of the room, King Arthur and his knights were sitting around a huge round table. They all wore brown tunics. They had shaggy hair and beards. Their names were carved in gold letters on the backs of their chairs. The Knights of the Round Table, whispered Jack. Morgan was talking to King Arthur. Beside the king sat a woman in a plain gray robe. She had pale skin and brown curly hair. Queen Guinevere, whispered Annie. Morgan left the king, and Jack and Annie moved quickly back into the shadows. A moment later, Morgan appeared. I told the king that 2 special friends of his have just arrived, she said. Come with me. As they walked with Morgan through the great hall, Jack shivered. The huge room was drafty and damp. There was no fire in the fireplace. The stone floor was so cold that Jack could feel the chill through his sneakers. They stopped near the round table. King Arthur stared at them with his piercing gray eyes. Greetings from Frog Creek, Annie said to the king and queen. Annie bowed and Jack bowed too. The queen smiled, but King Arthur did not. Your Majesty, you remember Jack and Annie? Said Morgan. You met them last summer in my library?" "Indeed, I shall never forget them," King Arthur said softly. "Greetings, Annie. Greetings, Jack. How do you come to be in Camelot on this bleak night?" "We came in the magic treehouse," said Annie. A shadow crossed the king's face. He looked at Morgan. "No, your majesty, I did not use my magic to bring them here," she said. "Perhaps a bit of magic still lingers in the treehouse, and it traveled on its own." "What's going on?" Jack wondered. "Why does the king seem unhappy about the magic treehouse?" King Arthur looked back at Jack and Annie. However you have come, you are welcome in my kingdom," he said. He turned to the queen. "Guinevere, these are the two friends who once gave me hope and courage in a time of need." Queen Guinevere smiled again, but there was a sad look in her eyes. "I have heard much about you," she said. "I've heard about you too," said Annie. "Allow me to present my knights," said King Arthur. "Sir Bors, Sir Kay, Sir Tristram." As the king named each knight, Jack and Annie nodded shyly. The knights nodded at them in return. Jack waited to hear the name Sir Lancelot, the most famous of Camelot's knights, but the king never said it. And finally, "Sir Bedivere and Sir Gawain," King Arthur said. The king then turned to 3 empty chairs at the table. And there once sat 3 who are lost to us now," he said. "Lost? How?" wondered Jack. "You may sit at their places and join our dinner," King Arthur said. "Thank you," said Annie. Following Morgan around the table, Jack read the names carved on the backs of the 3 empty chairs: Sir Lancelot, Sir Galahad, and Sir Percival. Jack took off his backpack and sat down in Sir Lancelot's place. As he sat tall and straight in the heavy wooden chair, Jack looked at the king and his knights. They were gnawing meat off bones and slurping wine from heavy goblets. They ate without manners or delight. Jack really wanted to take notes. He reached into his pack under the table and pulled out his notebook and pencil, but before he could write a word, a serving boy brought more food. Jack quickly put his things away. The boy set a greasy slab of beef on a soggy piece of bread in front of him. The food looked terrible. "Not much of a Christmas feast, huh?" Annie said in a low voice. Jack shook his head. I think he shook his head like that. Annie leaned close to Morgan and whispered, so King Arthur wouldn't hear. "What happened to the 3 lost knights?" she asked. "After Mordred's dark wizard cast his spell, the king sought help from the magicians of Camelot," Morgan said quietly. "They told him he must send his knights on a quest to the other world to recapture our kingdom's joy." "What's the other world?" said Jack. "It is an ancient enchanted land beyond the edge of the earth," said Morgan. "The place where all magic first began." "Wow," whispered Annie. "The king chose his 3 bravest knights to journey there," said Morgan. "When they did not come back, Arthur turned against his magicians. He blamed magic for all of Camelot's woes. Hence, he has banned magic of any kind from the kingdom forever." "But you're a magician," whispered Annie. "Did the king turn against you too?" "Arthur and I have a long friendship," said Morgan. "He has allowed me to stay in the castle as long as I promise not to practice the art of magic ever again." A feeling of dread crept over Jack. "So does that mean the magic treehouse is—" Morgan nodded. "Yes, banished from Camelot," she said. "I'm afraid this will be your last journey, and the last time we see each other." Her eyes filled with tears. She looked away. "What? The last time we see each other? Forever?" said Annie. Before Morgan could answer, the wooden door swung open with a bang. A wind rushed through the great hall. The torches and candles flamed brighter, making the shadows leap wildly on the walls. The sound of hoofbeats filled the room. A knight on a huge horse rode through the arched doorway. "Who's that?" The knight was dressed all in red, from his shining helmet to the long cloak on his back. His horse was dressed all in green, from the armor that covered his head to the cloth that hung from his saddle. "Oh, wow," breathed Annie. "A Christmas night." Okay, let's see. 20 minutes. We just got to chapter 4. We'll probably better stop here. Okay, the next chapter will be chapter 4, Who Will Go? Let me put a bookmarker right there. Wow. That's pretty wild, huh? You think Jack and Annie are going to be able to bring joy back to Camelot? Give people hope again? Sounds like a sad time, huh? Okay. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And we will see you on the next one.